Welcome, everyone. My name is Ron Wyden, and I'm the VP for Legislative Advocacy for the Oregon PTA. Oregon PTA is the largest volunteer-led child advocacy organization in Oregon, with thousands of members and local units across the state, and a history of going back over 125 years, trying to bring people together on improving the education, health, and safety for all children. It's my great pleasure to have our senior U.S. Senator for Oregon, Ron Wyden, with us today to ask him about the many pressing education issues that are currently under discussion in D.C. We have about 30 minutes with the senator. He has to run to some votes afterwards, and we'll record that part. We'll talk about what is going on with the various federal programs, and then also how we, families and advocates, educators, can advocate most effectively for our and all children. Feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself, to chime in during our conversation. After that half-hour conversation, I'd be happy to switch this meeting from a webinar to a more open meeting where you, our attendees, have an opportunity to briefly share thoughts and reflect on the discussion amongst ourselves. So let's get started. Senator Wyden, thank you again so much for being here with us today and letting us ask some questions that are on the minds of many caregivers and educators.
Thank you, Robin.
Before we jump into education and to kind of set the stage, can you give us a sense of how does it feel to be in the Capitol right now compared to, I don't know, a year ago or maybe even the first Trump presidency?
The way I would describe it, Robin, it feels very determined. I believe we understand what we're up against now. This is unprecedented in terms of cutbacks. It's unprecedented in terms of authoritarian approaches to various issues. And I think we're digging in because we know that this is a battle. And much of the legislative agenda goes to the Senate Finance Committee, where I am the senior Democrat. That's where we deal with Medicaid, for example. That's where we deal with mental health programs that are so important for young people and families. So I think that's how I'd characterize the mood in our office and certainly my judgment.
Thank you for that. So let's get into it on education. There's definitely a lot going on. Focusing on children, what in schools, what programs do you worry about the most right now?
The two that I'm particularly concerned about are mental health programs, because during the Biden administration, I was able to get help for the public schools for one-on-one counseling. And coming out of COVID, I thought that was particularly important. And then I care deeply about Medicaid. I think this battle with respect to Medicaid is a fight for kids' future. There are a number of vulnerable people who are affected, seniors and disabled folks, but right up at the top of my list is kids, because when you talk about kids and you talk about Medicaid funding, what you know is you're making an investment in the future of those kids, but they're also going to be the future workers of Oregon and the country, so they're a good investment for society at large.
Why do you think the Republicans' proposal, why do they believe cutting Medicaid is a good idea?
Well, it's a very short-sighted view. I think they think that this is practically socialism, some sort of big government program. I believe, though, it also factors into their kind of distillation of their economic program. They would like to cut Medicaid and programs, anti-hunger programs, for example, in order to free up more tax relief for the billionaires. And we all saw them at the inauguration day right behind Trump.
Thank you. Let's go into Medicaid, obviously kind of setting the basis for the children that they're healthy and can come to school, but going a little bit more into the educational programs, be it Title I, special education, school meals. How do you see that discussion going on right now?
Well, let's take a couple of them. Head Start, for example, between funding delays and leaked OMB budget documents and mass firing, I think it would be fair to say that Donald Trump has launched a full assault on Head Start and the child care that's so important for families. I was recently in Southern Oregon, in Medford in particular, and when people heard I was coming, they passed on that the payment that they were owed for Head Start had failed to come through. And we just bombarded the kids' agencies in Washington, D.C. I was able to free it up and announced it when I was there. And you could just see the palpable excitement and enthusiasm on the faces of the kids and the parents. And I said, look, remember, we can celebrate today in Medford because we got it renewed, but we know that this is going to be a battle again and again over the course of the Trump administration. And you know, if the Trump people have their way, you'd cause 12,000 kids in Oregon to lose their child care, and families would be scrambling trying to figure out a way to get that essential kind of care for families.
Any success with your colleagues across the aisle to emphasize the importance of of Head Start and what it means for our families?
The Head Start program and Title I, you know, are clearly something that Republicans know are on the chopping block. But what Republicans basically say is something along the lines of, well, those programs are useful, but let's just give it back to the states. And of course, the states are very hard pressed for revenue. And Title I, for example, has long been a lifeline of support for schools for vulnerable kids. I would like to expand Title I into areas like literacy in terms of older kids and the like. But right now, we're just fighting to keep what we have.
Another big bucket and really important issues for a lot of our members is special education. And I want to start by saying the federal government has never funded special education, obviously, to the extent that it has mandated it. But where do you see the discussion around special education and IDA right now?
I think special education has gotten a short shrift for a lot of years, but now it looks like they're just going to be completely ignored by the Trump administration. So this is a good time to kind of spell out where I think the challenges for social services generally is that, you know, political change for social needs rarely starts in Washington, D.C. or a Capitol building and trickles down. It's almost always the other way. It's grassroots up. And we need to have a lot of noise and a lot of grassroots involvement from parents with respect to special needs kids if we're going to get the attention of policymakers, because I think it is just, in terms of Republicans, it's a collective ignoring of these vulnerable kids. They long have not gotten a fair shake. Now they're just being totally ignored.
It is so depressing to hear how little importance is given to kids in DC by some. Let's talk about school meals to kind of go down all the good federal programs that are bringing some really well-needed sources of revenue to our schools and to our kids.
Yeah, you can't balance the budget on empty plates. And, you know, we've got families choosing between, you know, rent and dinner and these hunger programs I feel so strongly about. And they're very much intertwined with the health programs, because when you have vulnerable people, be they kids or seniors, and they can't get nutritious meals, that makes them particularly vulnerable to health issues. And the combination of cuts in anti-hunger programs and cuts to Medicaid is, in my view, a prescription for illness in Oregon in huge numbers. And I'm doing everything I can to protect those two programs on both the Budget Committee and as the senior Democrat on the Finance Committee.
Thank you. And we'll get to how can we as parents, caregivers, families help protect these programs in a little bit.
Well, there's one other program that maybe, just maybe, we're making a little bit of headway, and that's the Secure Rural Schools program. I wrote this program years ago. Oregon's share, particularly in the counties that are heavily forested, which is more than 50% of the state, Oregon's share has been more than $4 billion. And it goes for schools for kids and roads and basic services in rural communities. We may be making some headway in the House on that program, and I'll look forward to keeping you and Oregonians apprised. It's one of the largest expenditures I've been able to secure for Oregonians over the years, and if we can get that money, that provides some measure of ability to help these youngsters in rural schools.
And I believe it had bipartisan support.
It has long had bipartisan support. We're continuing that, and because a lot of that money goes to communities where Donald Trump, was very, very powerful in the election. I like to think that kids count at least there.
The Department of Education has also been in the news with cuts. Obviously, we as Oregon PTA and as National PTA are very much opposed to the Department of dismantling the Department of Education. Do you believe that will happen?
Well, here's where we are. The Trump administration just went out and announced, they just stepped up and announced that they would try to shutter the Department of Education. Now, that is blatantly illegal. They cannot do that, as the Department of Education is established in law and cannot just be abolished by an executive order, as much as Donald Trump would like to do it. So we want a department that is in a partnership with the states and local school districts, both in terms of sharing ideas about innovation and support, so kids can get the best possible, education. And the other aspect of this is there's no question in my mind that the Trump administration is running a rearguard effort to dismantle staffing and to lay off as many people as they possibly can, so as to harm the ability for states to have the kind of partnership I'm talking about with the federal government.
Yeah, a lot of families that I've heard are worried about the dismantling because of the oversight for special education, the resources for the NAEP testing, the national testing. How do you in Congress fight back and make sure that those support systems stay?
Well, you fight back now by, in effect, showing Republican legislators in particular, when they go home, you show them what damage these cutbacks are doing. People say, well, what's going to be the thing that eventually produces change? And I always tell them that I think the single biggest factor is when Republican senators go back to their states. We're going to be back for Memorial Day. I'll be having town hall meetings. A lot of them don't have town hall meetings anymore because they have people get up and tell them what they think of some of these ill-advised ideas. But when these legislators hear that people at home are mad and angry, that's when they start saying, hey, we better turn this thing around, or people are going to say they just as soon get somebody else to do the job.
Talking about ill-advised ideas, school vouchers was proposed in legislation, is moving. Again, PTA very much opposed to providing public money to private schools. How much of a chance does that legislation have to pass, and where do you stand on that?
We're going to have a fight on our hands, no question about it. My stand on this has been unequivocal. I am opposed to anything that takes away funding from public schools. That's been my position for a long time, and it's not changing.
And how fearful do we have to be that there is a realistic path for this legislation? Or do you see that there's enough support for
Well,
public
the Republicans are going to push it at every stage of the debate. I mean, my understanding is, and I haven't seen the House package, they may have included a voucher in the House reconciliation bill, but I want everybody to understand that if that's the case, I'm going to fight it at every step.
Are there any, and this is a very optimistic question, are there any opportunities that you see for potentially increasing any kind of funding for our children or schools?
Well, the area that I really think has some potential is mental health, because mental health knows no political party. And kids came out of COVID, and clearly they and families and communities really lost some time. And as I say, this affects people regardless of political parties. So when I've been working on this in the Senate Finance Committee, I've gotten some support in the past from Republicans. Now, this is a much tougher climate in the Trump years and the like, but that's the one that I'm going to really pull out all the stops for. Of course, I'm going to fight hard against Medicaid. We lost 50 to 49 on my proposal to slash that $880 billion cut from the Republican proposal. The one I think you asked, which is the one with the best shot, I think it's mental health.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you're planning or what your proposal is?
Well, what I want to do, and I started it during the Biden years, is I wanted to get mental health funds that could be used by local school districts in accord with state law and their rules to make sure that we could pick up on the needs of individual students coming out of COVID. And I was able to get those Medicaid dollars. Clearly, the Trump people are not very inclined to do it, but we can build on that because school districts are reporting really good results.
I want to pick a question from the chat. As you are aware, Oregon has a huge issue with chronic absenteeism. Any thoughts on getting kids back into schools and how, if there are any ideas coming from the federal government to support states?
Well, I'm not sure you want the federal government to just step in and try to wave its wand, but clearly resources for programs that make young people and families excited about education. I think that would be one of the factors that I would point to. I think it is a complex challenge, and I'm not sure you want Senate Finance Committee to stroll on out there with our so-called 3-point bill or some other fictitious kind of concept. But I do think that federal dollars, particularly through the Department of Education, for innovative approaches that schools can, in effect, if one community has find something that works that can be shared, I think something like that would make sense.
We've been doing these kind of meetings with a lot of people on school funding, and two questions I've asked every guest who has participated and that I would like to ask you too is, what is something that you like about Oregon schools as they are? What is something that we're good at? And the other thing,
I heard that you guys have been talking about that, and I think that our bouncing back history, whether it's COVID or something else that hit us our state hard, is something that I'm very proud of. I actually have written a book recently called It Takes Chutzpah, which is the Yiddish word for grit and determination and being willing to fight back. And the irony is, one of the things I point to, and I point to it about something I'm proud of for the city of Portland, is our resiliency and our bounce back capability. When we get hit hard, we're down, but schools come back, parents come back, our city comes back.
what is something, the other question that I always ask is, what is something you would like to see more of in schools in Oregon? If you had the magic.
I always want to encourage more parental participation. We've got a good level. We can do better. A lot of parents are just so hard pressed. They're working 2 jobs. They're juggling, from morning till night. But I always want to try to encourage parental participation. And, frequently I like to come and have town hall meetings in the Portland public schools and the like. I think that helps to encourage more parental participation too. Parents come and ask questions.
As PTA, I can't disagree with that. So let's move on to what can we do? How can we support our children? What's the most effective way to advocate right now in DC for us?
Well, I have town hall meetings in every county every year. I've had more than 1,115 of them. I've got 3 of them coming up. People can see it on my website, but I think it's really important for people to say to their elected officials, we'd like to ask you some questions. Where are you going to be and when? And I think that's something that I want to advocate for. It's open to all town hall meetings, and there's no substitute for them. And I'd advocate them for people at every level of government, the federal government, the state government, the local government, the water district, you name it.
There's a question in the chat, by the way. When we come to town halls, how does that translate to action in DC?
Well, what I try to do is make sure that people who talk about a specific issue, like say tariffs or Medicaid or one of the things we're talking about, they get an answer that's clear. They can hold me accountable. I say, we've got a vote coming up. I'm doing this in the finance committee. I'm doing this somewhere else. And then we try to stay in touch with them on those kinds of issues. But that's why I do these town meetings. I don't do them to exercise my larynx. I do it so that people, I don't give any speeches. We walk in, I say, appreciate being here. This is town hall meeting number 1100, whatever it is. It's here for you to talk about what's important to you. I'm going to listen. I'll try to respond. And I like to think it chips away at some of the cynicism and frustration people have for government.
How do we work with legislators who are not yet as understanding of the needs of our children? How do we can create change with other parts of our Oregon congressional delegation, or even legislators from other states that are?
I think if you can find citizens who, for example, if you're talking about a conservative, find some parents who are conservative, who want to work with you, want to work with them. You're trying to build partnerships and coalitions. The other day I was talking about Social Security at a town hall meeting, and I asked everybody, how many of you know friends in other states in AARP, the retired persons organization? They all raised their hands. I said, I'd like you to call those people in the other states and ask them to call their congressperson to advocate for something. And a lot of them did.
Do you have any thoughts on effective messaging for your colleagues, towards your colleagues across the aisle?
The most effective message is short, simple, and something that allows people to say, I can go home and talk to people about that in my Fred Meyer store. I've been to every Fred Meyer in our state. There's more than 50 of them. I have my kind of stops as I go to the next town hall meeting. I often, go to the little area where you can sit down and you can have coffee and you can talk to people. That's the measure of being an effective communicator for schools and families, is going out and talking and listening, mostly listening.
Do you see, with your Republican colleagues, do you see any kind of messaging or framing that works better than others? Is it
I'll give you an example. The social issues are very, very controversial. I feel very strongly that the best way to deal with them is in the context of privacy, personal judgments, and I'll give you a couple of examples. I was the first United States Senator to support marriage equality. I said, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get one. And I can now go practically anywhere, and people say they agree with it. On transgender issues, I feel strongly those are private. They are personal. Elvis Presley said it pretty well in one of his songs, the late Elvis Presley said, "Don't be cruel."
Yes. I know we're coming on top of at the end of our. I have one quick question. I was always personally wondering, because I'm obviously getting a lot of emails saying, email your state senator about this issue or that. I'm like, but he already agrees with what we're asking for. Does it still make sense to email you on the issues?
Sure. It's good to be in touch with all of your legislators when there's a vote coming up. Obviously, Oregonians will know a bit more about Senator Merkley and I than they will about, the senator from some other state. But it's very good to have people's input. It's very good to have their particular thoughts about a subject, because often we won't have heard about it. Now, I want people following the discussion, and Robin, thank you for doing a good job. You got a lot of questions in. If I was fed intravenously and I never left my desk, I could not read every communication that was sent here. But somebody in our office does. They read the emails and the texts and everything that comes in, and we very much keep track of what people are talking about. And so we welcome the input, and we've worked very closely with the PTA over my time in public service, and as the state's senior senator, I'm very proud of my relationship with the organization and the good work that y'all do.
Thank you so much for those kind words. And thank you so much for being here today, for answering many, but not all of our questions. And thank you so much for your advocacy.
Well, let's do this, Robin. This is not an official proceeding, but you've asked a lot of good questions, a lot of hard ones. I'm sure there's some things that I've said that people don't like, but I'll make this almost like I'm making a motion that we continue this. So I hereby move now that this great conversation with the PTA be continued, and I hear no objection, so it is so ordered. Thanks for the good session.
Thank you so much.
Take good care.
So,